2014, the largest grassroots campaign in the country. You know, I'm looking at Olga and Nell because they were regulars showing up in our office, doing what was necessary to win. And you know, when people ask me what I'm most proud about, it is the volunteers and the folks and how we won that race in 2014, the most expensive campaign in the country, the amount of outside money, which again, if there's one thing that I'd want to change, is how do you overturn Citizens United? And again, that's why this presidential election is so important, because you know, we hope President Obama gets to appoint a Supreme Court nominee, but we've already seen that the Republicans have come out and said they're going to do everything they have to block you know, that nominee. So from even following what the Constitution said he should be doing. So you know, the nature of the district, we're always going to be in these tough competitive races. So first off, to a lot of the folks in this room who have volunteered on my campaign, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Really do appreciate it. Let me rewind and talk a little bit about myself, because you know, people often ask, you know, why are you running for Congress at a time when, I'm not going to lie, Congress is a dysfunctional body. It's because I'm grateful for everything this country, our country, has given me, the opportunity. You know, my parents immigrated here from India in the 1950s, really like generations of Americans, seeking a chance at a better life, a chance to build towards a future. You know, they were welcomed here. You know, they were able to get their education. My mom became a public school teacher for 35 years, 3rd and 4th grade. My dad was able to become an engineer. I grew up going to, I was born and raised in Southern California, grew up going to the best public schools in the country. I thought I had a great public school education, from kindergarten through 12th grade, through some community college, and on to undergrad and medical school at University of California, Irvine. I paid $393 a quarter to go to medical school. That was remarkable. So I could work part-time, get some scholarships, take out some student loans, and go to 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, and graduate with less than $10,000 of debt. The reason why I start my story there is when people ask why I chose to run for Congress, I know I didn't get here by myself. I got here because of the opportunity the country gave me and the investments that were made in me. Now, none of that was a handout. I worked extremely hard to get where I am today, but those opportunities were there. That door of opportunity was open for me. And I think for far too many of the next generation, that opportunity no longer exists, or it is going to be harder. So when I look at the Democratic presidential candidates, and I was with the Sacramento Bee today, and they asked me, what I thought about Bernie Sanders. I said, I think he's raising a lot of issues that matter to a large number of Americans. And if we look around the folks in our district, there are far too many families, both parents working, but they're struggling. They may have good jobs, they're living paycheck to paycheck, but they're struggling because they've got kids on one end that want to and aspire to go to college or aspire to get out there, and they have aging parents on the other end, and they're struggling to try to care for those parents. And when you look at what's happening in America, it's that group of individuals that form the backbone of our middle class. They're not looking for a handout from the government, but they are looking from a government that understands the challenges that they face and that is stepping out there. And that's what our challenge is, and that's the urgency of now. And I think Senator Sanders does tap into some of those aspirations, and he's raising issues. Now, whoever our nominee is at the end of the day, whether it's Senator Sanders or Secretary Clinton, it is the most important election to hold on to the White House. Because when we look at the nominees on their side, you never ever want to have to utter the words President Donald Trump. And we have to do everything within our power to prevent that. Because if you look at the issues and the rhetoric and the racism that Donald Trump is kind of putting out there, he is tapping into the worst danger that is out there and raising this level of anger. And we have to go out there and condemn that. That's unacceptable. And again, we have to do everything we can, once we have a nominee, to come together as a party and make sure we hold on to the White House. The same thing, I'd put Ted Cruz in that same category if you look at what Senator Cruz also says. So yeah, I'm going to work really hard to get reelected, but I'd say the most important election is holding on to the White House, because it all starts there, and that really is our firewall. Now, Dan touched on the importance of getting the House of Representatives back, but even, that's going to be important, but we have an opportunity to pick up the Senate and get the Senate in Democrats' hands. We have to do that as well, and that'll start with our presidential nominee, but we have a real opportunity there. I won't stand up here and say we're going to get the House of Representatives back, but if they nominated Donald Trump, anything's possible. So let's talk about the race that we have here. First off, I'm grateful to the California Democratic Party for their endorsement and the overwhelming show of support. We are going to step into a race that's always competitive by nature. Just the nature of the district is probably one of the most evenly split districts in the country. As I've always said, I'm going to try to represent the entire district, and continue to do my best to represent the entire district. If you look at my opponents, on the Republican side that's emerging, it's the Sheriff, Scott Jones. And I won't go through his issue by issue, but if you read the Sacramento Bee this Sunday, you did read and see that he said if Donald Trump is their nominee, he will endorse and support Donald Trump. There's a clear difference here, and Scott Jones is not a Democrat. In fact, he's come out as pro-life, as anti-choice. I was Planned Parenthood's Legislator of the Year in the last Congress. He's come out against the minimum wage. He's, it is someone, when I talk about how we keep our community safe, it's up to an individual if they want to own a gun. But, I think most of us would agree that we don't want terrorists to get guns. He's against even doing background checks on folks that are on the terror watch list. So there's a real difference here. I also know that, the Elk Grove Democratic Club may now be the most popular Democratic club. We certainly gotten a lot of press in the last few months. I understand that there are some Democrats that have concern about my supporting the president's ability to negotiate a trade deal, the TPA vote. I've always been pretty open with my constituents and with my supporters. Every other president's had that ability to negotiate a deal. I was honest with the president saying, I see no reason we shouldn't let you engage in the negotiations. If we can actually unwind some of the bad things that happened in NAFTA in a better deal, as Mexico is part of this deal, we ought to try. If we can raise labor standards around the world, we ought to try. If we can raise environmental standards around the world, we ought to try. If we can open up markets around the world, we're already a very open market in the United States. Everyone can sell their goods and services here, but when we try to go to other countries, they often have these huge barriers. If we can open up those markets so we can compete on a fair playing field, I know the American worker will always win. We have the best and most highly skilled workforce. We have the best products that are out there. It's just that far too often we're competing on an unfair playing field. So what I said is, look, there's no reason not to give you a chance to negotiate this deal, but I'm going to look at the deal and make sure it raises labor standards, raises environmental standards, is good for our economy, and is good for the American worker. That's the litmus test that I have. And this is a 6,000-page document, so we are taking our time going through it. It is too important to rush to one conclusion or another, because we're talking about our kids and grandkids and their future and what kind of economy they'll be working in. And globalization's already happened. let's create a fair playing field, and I think on a fair playing field, the American worker always wins. So I'm happy to take a couple questions down if you want to.
Do you want me to, you can call
Okay,
people?
if you want, yeah, sure, okay.
A question.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Donald Trump. Question. How do you think his campaign is run where he's had the majority of the state's caucuses? What do you think that he's doing that some of the other nominees aren't, and why is he reaching those people?
I think Donald Trump has, you know, I think there are a lot of people that are worried about, you know, the future's changed very quickly, technology's changed. You know, folks that should be doing well, getting ready to retire, all of a sudden the recession hit them pretty hard. So I think, you know, he's tapping into that worry and concern, but he's turning it into anger. I think Bernie Sanders also taps into some of that worry and concern with the rising generation. Can they ever go to college? If they go to college, can they find work? He's doing it in a different way. He's tapping that into hope and aspiration. I think the dangerous thing with Donald Trump is he's flaming this anger, and then I think there are elements of racism and other elements that he's giving them the ability to, you know, to express that anger that was always there. I think that's really dangerous. That's not who we are as Americans. It is not the America that I believe in, which is an inclusive America. That, yeah, we've got challenges, but we've got to come together as a nation. And I think, you know, when I talk to my Republican colleagues, they are very worried about, you know, Donald Trump as their nominee.
So, do you think he's appealing to the general public's insecurities?
I think he is taking some of that fear and turning it into anger.
Okay.
So.
One more question. You talked about the American labor force. A lot of our companies, American companies, are now offshoring. And they're in China, for example, is saying, we're going to open up companies here in California, we're going to create jobs, you know, we're going to better your economy. But that's good on the surface, but down deep, that money's funneling right back into China.
Right. So we are starting to see American companies come back to America. We are starting to see manufacturing jobs come back to America. The real issue is, as our economy picks up, are workers sharing in the benefits that the corporations are seeing, right? So if you looked at 30 years ago, 40 years ago, as companies did better, the workers did better. Fast forward today, as companies do better, their shareholders do better. And we have to go back to this context where if the companies do well, the workers should do well as well, right? Where there's this shared equity, and that's something that fundamentally has changed, right? And you see that in a lot of the companies making decisions that are more based towards the shareholders and not towards the workers. And that's something that Senator Sanders actually is bringing up, and that's something that for those that were at the convention, Vice President Biden actually talked about pretty articulately. And I think that fundamentally is what changed. How do we, you know, this isn't about companies not being successful. I want American companies to be incredibly successful because I still firmly believe we have the most successful companies and the most innovative companies in the world. This is about, as those companies become successful, how do you share the wealth with your employees? How do you reward your employees? And that's what it was 30 or 40 years ago, where it wasn't the CEO